Have you ever wondered why some people stay calm, even when the world tries to provoke them? No raised voice, no emotional reaction, just presence, grounded still. It's not because they were born that way. It's because they trained their minds to stay sovereign, to choose response over reaction, and to understand one powerful truth: no one can control you unless you let them. In this video, we explore the Stoic path to emotional mastery, not through theory, but through lived philosophy. You'll learn how to reclaim your inner space when people test your limits, how to let go of expectations without bitterness, and how to protect your peace without needing to prove anything. This is not about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming untouchable in the best possible way, calm, clear, and deeply alive. If you're ready to stop being emotionally hijacked by others, stay with me. Let's begin. A quiet truth that eats away at you when a small habit makes you weaker every day. There is a habit that few people dare to talk about. It's often seen as normal, even harmless. But if you've ever felt drained, unmotivated, or increasingly unsure of yourself, that habit may be silently eating away at you day by day. Most of us don't notice it because it doesn't come from a major life event. It begins in those quiet moments when we seek instant gratification to escape uncomfortable emotions, stress, boredom, disappointment, loneliness. But in that very moment, a pattern begins, one that slowly erodes your willpower. Each time you repeat the act, you're not just satisfying a fleeting urge, you're reinforcing a habit that teaches your mind to depend on pleasure just to feel okay. The more it happens, the more disconnected you become from your clarity, your goals, and your inner discipline. Stoicism doesn't teach you to run from desire. It teaches you to recognize what's manipulating you in silence. The Stoics believed weakness is not in feeling desire, but in being ruled by it without even realizing. Ask yourself, after each time, do you feel stronger or emptier? Do you feel more free, or just trying to fill a nameless void? This seemingly harmless habit, left unchecked, slowly undermines your focus, your emotional resilience, and your sense of direction. It makes you quicker to anger, more anxious, more distracted, and eventually, it chips away at your identity through repeated compromises. If you want to master yourself, to stay grounded in a chaotic world, and to preserve true inner strength, you must begin at the place where you're most likely to let go. What weakens you is not the world outside. It's the moments you live unconsciously, mistaking gratification for healing, when in fact, it's the sweetest trap, the dopamine game, the trap behind instant gratification. You feel tired, unmotivated, easily distracted. The things that once excited you now seem dull, except for one instant gratification. That one thing that keeps pulling you in, even if just for a few minutes. And you wonder, why do I feel so drained, even when I haven't done that much? The answer lies in a small but powerful word: dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter linked to pleasure, reward, and motivation. Every time you engage in high-stimulus behaviors like masturbation, watching pornography, or consuming any form of quick pleasure, your brain releases a surge of dopamine. And here's the danger. Your brain doesn't care whether that pleasure is healthy or harmful. It only responds to intensity. As you repeat the habit, your brain adapts. You need more of it to feel the same level of satisfaction. Just like any addiction, the more you stimulate it, the less sensitive your brain becomes to natural joy. This is why you start to lose interest in simple pleasures, reading a book, meditating, deep work, or having a meaningful conversation. None of these match the dopamine hit your brain now craves. So you find yourself chasing quicker, louder, more accessible rewards. And that's how you fall into the loop. The mind craves fast pleasure, but your body and spirit grow weaker. You become more irritable, more anxious, and less able to focus. You live in a state of needing stimulation just to feel okay. But this isn't just biology, it's philosophy. Stoic thinkers like Seneca and Epictetus warned about this long ago. The man who lives to indulge himself will never know freedom. They knew that the more we depend on pleasure, the more we lose connection with our true nature, our reason, our discipline, our purpose beyond impulse. Dopamine isn't evil. It's a tool. But when you're unaware of its mechanism, it quietly becomes your master. Mindfulness is the ability to see what's happening inside, to pause, to observe an urge without immediately reacting, to watch your desire rise and choose not to be swept away by it. You don't have to eliminate joy or pleasure, but you must learn to distinguish between what nourishes you long-term and what merely satisfies you in the moment, only to leave you emptier afterward. Inner freedom doesn't come from chasing pleasure, it comes from mastering desire. And that begins with awareness, with the smallest of choices. No moment is too small to begin reclaiming your life. The unconscious loop only ends when you are brave enough to face it. The ancients saw it coming. Freedom doesn't come from indulging yourself. Thousands of years ago, before the internet, before pornography, before social media filled with visual temptation, the Stoic philosophers looked deeply into human nature and gave us a timeless warning. No one is free who is a slave to pleasure. Seneca once wrote, "To them, freedom wasn't the ability to do whatever you want. It was the strength not to do what you know. You shouldn't even when it feels good, even when it's tempting, because if you cannot resist a habit, then that habit owns you." They understood that humans live on two levels: the instinctive, where desire, fear, and pleasure live, and the rational, where we think, reflect, and choose. When instincts lead, we live like animals. When reason leads, we live like humans. And that's the tragedy of our generation. When you indulge your instincts, daily gratifying your urges the moment they arise, you don't just lose energy, you lose resistance. You lose the ability to govern yourself. You lose the ability to choose between what feels good and what's truly right. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wrote in Meditations, "If you cannot overcome desire, don't dream of freedom." This isn't about asceticism, it's psychological truth. The more you indulge, the weaker you become in adversity. The more easily manipulated you are by an image, a feeling, a fleeting invitation. And that weakness doesn't stay in private moments. It leaks into your life. You can't focus because you're addicted to stimulation. You lose patience when things don't go your way. You feel insecure because deep down, you know you're not in control. The Stoics never told you to hate pleasure. They simply warned you not to depend on it. Because when you need a dopamine hit just to feel okay, that okay is an illusion. You're not healing the emptiness, you're just temporarily forgetting it. As Epictetus said, true freedom is choosing your response to desire. It's seeing the urge and not reacting. It's sitting with it, observing, and then choosing what aligns with your dignity. At that moment, you're not just resisting a habit, you're building a mindful foundation for life, not letting emotions drive you, not letting impulses blur your reason, not letting temporary satisfaction destroy long-term strength. Freedom doesn't come from doing what you want. Freedom comes from mastering what you want. And that's what the Stoic philosophers saw more clearly than anyone in our age ever did. The price of instant gratification. Why the strong-minded don't let instinct lead. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to always maintain razor-sharp focus, abundant energy, and a calm, magnetic presence, while you, despite having willpower, often feel drained, distracted, impulsive, and unable to stay disciplined? The answer may start with something very small. a habit of instant gratification. When you give in to your instincts, especially easily accessible sexual temptations like excessive masturbation or watching pornography, you are trading something invisible but deeply important: your inner strength. It doesn't show immediately, but slowly. It eats away at your focus, your confidence, even your self-respect. Because after each act of indulgence, a familiar feeling returns. A little emptiness, a little guilt, a little disorientation. What you thought was release is actually a form of escape from loneliness, from pressure, from silent fears. And then you do it again, not because you want to, but because you're used to it, dependent on it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be strong so that you are not dragged around by pleasure, no matter how alluring it is." Because he understood, if you can't control yourself in small things, you will also be weak in big things. You won't be able to build anything lasting, because from the roots, you're already betraying yourself. Strong individuals, leaders, great artists, legendary warriors, they don't live perfect lives, but they all have one thing in common: they don't let instinct lead. They may feel the urge, but they don't let the urge dictate. They may feel the temptation, but they choose what is right over what is easy. You don't have to become a monk, but if you want to live a life of depth, direction, and strength, you must begin by mastering what seems the smallest, primal desire. Because each time you give in just to feel a little ease for a few minutes, you are training yourself to become weaker. And every time you say no to it, you are building inner strength. When you master your instincts, you're no longer governed by trivial things. You become sharper, more focused, more aware. And you begin to reclaim something precious that many have lost in this era: self-respect. No one can take away your self-respect, except you when you betray yourself in the dark. Remember, great individuals don't let instinct choose their path. They let reason lead and turn discipline into a quiet power. And you can begin that, too, starting today. The first step to freedom, self-discipline, is the key to inner strength. True freedom does not come from doing whatever you want, whenever you want. It comes from knowing what is right and having the strength to do it, even when it's hard, even when your instincts scream for comfort. In an age where every temptation is just one tap away, self-discipline is no longer option. All it is essential for survival. Without it, you become a puppet of pleasure, emotion, unconscious habits, and the slow erosion of procrastination. Epictetus once said, "No one is free who has not mastered himself." So if you are feeling tired from lack of motivation, unable to focus, or empty after giving in to your impulses, this is the time to return to the core: discipline. Discipline is not suppression. It is a promise to yourself that you will act based on what you know is right, not what you feel in the moment. Start small. When you feel the urge to scroll mindlessly, put the phone down. When desire rises, pause, breathe, walk away, and don't react immediately. When you think "I deserve to relax," ask yourself, is this true rest, or am I avoiding responsibility? Each time you pause before acting, you create space between emotion and choice, and within that space, real power is born. A person without discipline drifts with the current of emotions and pleasure, but a person with discipline, no matter how chaotic the world is, can stand firm, because they have an unshakable inner pillar. Discipline helps you, not to react impulsively, but to respond with intention, not to escape into pleasure, but to face your emotions, not to procrastinate, but to act even when inspiration is absent, not to rely on reminders, because you remind yourself through your purpose. It's not about forcing yourself to suffer. It's about giving yourself a strong structure to rise, rather than being dragged down. Because if you don't discipline yourself, life will do it for you by stripping away your freedom, your self-respect, and your inner vitality. And discipline is not something you're born with. It's something you train day by day, decision by decision, each time you overcome temptation. Each time you say no to instinct, you say yes to a stronger version of yourself. Start today. Small right actions repeated daily will become an unshakable strength within you. Directing your energy, live for something greater than yourself. It's no coincidence that those who easily fall into instinct, who easily lose emotional control, often feel empty and directionless. Because when energy has no clear direction, it gets drained into instant pleasures, unconscious loops, and fleeting emotions. You may discipline yourself for a few days with sheer willpower, but if you don't know where you're headed, you'll easily return to who you used to be. That's why Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius emphasized a core principle. Don't waste your life on things that don't matter. Live for something greater than yourself. When you live only to satisfy sensations, you will quickly feel exhausted. But when you are clear about what you're building, your energy is no longer scattered, it becomes a powerful force of direction. Look at the strong men out there. They are not immune to desire or temptation, but they have something greater to pursue: a goal, a principle, a mission. They understand every hour spent learning, creating, building is a step toward true freedom. Every time they refuse instant pleasure, they preserve energy for what truly matters. Every day, they live with intention. They strengthen an inner power no one can take away. And you can do the same. Ask yourself, what truly matters to me beyond fleeting moments of pleasure? What do I want my life to be about? If I give up one meaningless habit today, what meaningful habit would I replace it with? You don't have to find your life's purpose right away. Just start with one simple thing that truly matters to you. Maybe it's learning a new skill, building a good habit, developing a personal project, anything that makes you feel like you're moving forward instead of repeating yourself. Because when you don't live for something bigger, you get swept up by the small. But when you do live for something higher, you'll see instinct grow weaker and reason grow stronger. Your life energy, that raw but potent force, needs somewhere to flow. If not, it will break apart in addictions, in impulsive reactions, in uncontrollable emotions. But when you channel that energy into something worthy, you are not just living. You are creating a life of purpose, transforming instinct when sexual energy becomes the fuel for creation and contribution. There's a truth rarely spoken out loud. Sexual energy, often associated solely with pleasure and primal urges, is, in fact, one of the most powerful sources of creative energy within us. It's no coincidence that many philosophers, warriors, artists, and great inventors throughout history have spoken about the art of transforming desire into creativity and service. They didn't suppress their instincts, nor did they indulge them blindly. They learned how to redirect them toward more sustainable values. The Stoics called this true inner power, the ability to master your internal energy and use it to build rather than deplete. When you let your instincts lead, your energy fragments. You feel a rush of stimulation for a moment, but quickly afterward comes the emptiness, the fatigue. But when you channel that energy into your work, your creativity, your learning, your physical training, or service to others, you begin to notice. You focus more easily. You feel more inspired. You push closer to the finish line of your goals. That's because you're no longer scattering your energy into fleeting pleasures, but gathering it to create real value. Imagine a waterfall crashing down without control. It only erodes. But if you build a dam, if you redirect that flow wisely, it generates power, electricity, movement. Sexual energy works the same way. Nikola Tesla, the brilliant inventor, remained celibate, not because he lacked desire, but because he wanted to preserve all his life energy for creation and discovery. Many Eastern martial arts masters, many Western philosophers have practiced temperance not to escape emotion, but to achieve absolute clarity and focus. And you can begin this too. You don't need to become a monk. or take an extreme vow. Just start by observing every time an instinct arises and pausing to redirect it. Asking yourself, how can I use this energy for something more meaningful? Turning urges into action. Training, writing, learning a new skill, building a project. It won't be easy at first, but each time you consciously choose a better path, you are nurturing a stronger, wiser, freer version of yourself. Because living mindfully doesn't mean destroying your instincts. It means guiding them towards something better. When you stop, clarity, confidence, and control begin to return. Picture waking up one morning without that lingering emptiness, without the exhausting cycle that has drained you, without those weak moments that make you question yourself. All that remains is a sense of lightness, clarity, and a quiet energy radiating from within. That is what happens when you stop, when you let go of a habit that seems small but silently controls you, when you escape the grip of instinct and begin to master your own mind. You don't have to wait for some day to see change. It begins the moment you say no to instant gratification. Just after a few days, your mind becomes sharper. You look at others with confidence rather than avoidance. You speak less, but with more clarity and resolve. Most importantly, you're no longer the person you once doubted. You begin to believe in yourself. Why? Because every time you resist fleeting satisfaction, you rebuild trust with yourself. You prove, I am capable of control. I am not a slave to emotion, desire, or circumstance. When dopamine no longer dominates your mind, your brain begins to restore its natural balance. You're no longer driven by blind impulses. Instead, you enter a deeper state where you start truly hearing yourself again, feeling genuinely connected to life. Many believe that quitting this habit will make life dull, uninspired. But the truth is, real inspiration doesn't come from depletion, but from preservation and transformation. When you stop doing the thing that makes you feel guilty afterward, you don't just grow stronger, you also release all that mental energy trapped in shame, frustration, and pointless repetition. And then you realize, true freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want. It comes from being strong enough not to do everything you want. When you step out of that loop, not because anyone forced you, but because you chose it, control returns. Not a rigid kind of control fueled by willpower, but a gentle and steady mindfulness. You're no longer fighting in chaos. You're simply standing still in clarity, choosing to face it, comfort, or true freedom. There will come a moment when you must stand at a crossroads. No more hiding, no more delaying, no more justifying with, I'll change, but not yet. Because every time you say not yet, you're choosing comfort. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet drift, little by little each day. A silent compromise with what feels easy, but makes you weaker. Two voices are speaking inside you. One is the voice of instinct, always whispering, just this once. Everyone does it. No one will know. It's sweet, persuasive, and always sounds reasonable. But the other is the voice of your deeper self, quieter, but clearer. I'm betraying myself. I wasn't born to live like this. I want more than temporary satisfaction. That dialogue happens every day in your mind before you decide to repeat or to stop. The difference between someone who lives in mediocrity and someone who lives with inner freedom is not their circumstances, nor their natural talent. It's their choice. Do you choose to face yourself or to run back to familiar comfort? The brave are not those who've never failed. The brave are those who dare to face the truth, admit they're being controlled by something small, and decide to rise and reclaim their power. Inner freedom doesn't come from outside. It's not something you can buy. No one can give it to you. It only comes when you choose to live mindfully, when you choose to rise above yourself at your weakest moment. You can choose comfort, but you'll have to live with the emptiness inside. Or you can choose discomfort at first so that later you gain something no one can take away: self-trust. Remember, you cannot become strong if you always run from what makes you weak. And if you've read this far, it means a part of you is already ready to choose differently. Choose true freedom, not for anyone else, but because you deserve a life where you no longer have to hide from yourself. Observe your emotions. Instead of being pulled by them, step back to regain inner mastery. Have you ever felt like your emotions took over and you couldn't resist? One minute you're calm, then a message, an image, a memory flashes by, and suddenly you're triggered, agitated, angry, filled with desire. No warning, no choice, only instinct taking over the wheel. But what if I told you this? You are not your emotions. It's true, you have emotions, but you are not your emotions. Between instinct and reaction, there is a space, a small moment, often overlooked, but if you learn to pause there, you begin to master yourself rather than be controlled. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have the power not to have an opinion. You can choose not to react." It sounds simple, but that is the peak of mindfulness. You don't need to scream when angry. You don't need to run when anxious. And you don't need to sink into pleasure to soothe some vague discomfort. All of these emotions, they can be observed rather than obeyed. Imagine this. You're in a dark room suddenly. A wave of emotion rises like a tidal surge. But instead of reacting immediately, you do something different. You turn on the light. That light is awareness. It's the question, where is this emotion coming from? Is it really urgent? What if I do nothing? What will happen? Suddenly, you're no longer the one being tossed by the wave. You become the one at the wheel. The wave still comes, but you're not drowning in it anymore. This is the power of stepping back, not to avoid, but to see clearly, not to suppress emotions, but to understand them, then choose how to respond. When you do this, you no longer have to apologize for impulsive actions. You no longer feel guilty for repeating the same mistakes, and you stop feeling trapped in the loop of emotion, reaction, regret. You break that unconscious chain and replace it with conscious awareness. If you want to break free from habit, if you want to truly master your emotions instead of being ruled by them, then there is no tool more powerful than learning to observe your emotions without reacting right away. Start with the smallest things. When a craving arises, don't act, wait 10 minutes. When you feel irritated, say nothing. Write it down first. When your heart races, return to your breath to remind yourself that you still have a choice. That's the moment you reclaim control, and you'll begin to see something essential. Within you, there is always a silent, wise, grounded observer. You just need to learn how to return to them. Living mindfully, when awareness replaces instinct and you become truly free. There is a profound truth most people are never taught. You can go through your entire life without ever being truly awake. You do everything: eat, sleep, work, rest, but most of the time, you're on autopilot. You react out of habit, fleeting emotions, and sudden impulses. You think you're living, but in truth, it's your instinct that's living in your place. That's why Stoicism is not just about discipline or resisting desire. At its core, it is an invitation to live consciously moment by moment. So what does it mean to live mindfully? It's not about meditating for hours. It's not about escaping your emotions. It's the ability to see yourself as you live. When desire arises, you see it. When emotions surge, you notice them. When familiar behaviors try to return, you pause instead of reacting. And in that pause, freedom is born. Epictetus once said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of those events." That insight only comes through awareness. when you're present enough to choose your lens rather than let your mind replay the same old script. Imagine this. You're walking through a stressful day. Your body's tired, your mind is overstimulated. Your emotions rise and fall like undercurrents. In that state, an old habit calls your name, the one you've tried to quit. And just like every time before, you're about to give in. But this time, you wake up. You see yourself about to do it. You realize why you're exhausted, avoiding a feeling, slipping into unconscious routine, and you choose not to do it. Not because you forced yourself, but because you were awake enough to recognize that you had a choice. That's true freedom. Not freedom of action, but freedom from being controlled by instinct, habit, fear, and unconscious craving. So how do you train this kind of mindfulness? Pause often in the middle of work, discomfort, irritation. Stop for 5 seconds and ask, what am I feeling right now? Name the emotion. Just whispering, I feel tense, or I feel desire in your mind breaks the automatic loop. Practice observing without rushing to act. You don't need to change it right away. Just seeing yourself is already an act of mastery. Mindful living is not some enlightened state. It is a repeated choice made every day. And as you practice long enough, you'll discover you're no longer run by instinct. You are living with awareness, and you are finally the one steering your own ship. The journey to emotional mastery, reduced anxiety, and inner freedom doesn't lie in grand gestures. It begins with the courage to see yourself clearly in the present moment, because only when you see clearly do you become free. And from that freedom, a grounded, powerful, mindful version of you is born from within.